Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? I almost forgot to start the show. I was watching a video of a dog. So, I get distracted by these things. The funny thing is there are cars in the video, and the dog is not distracted by the cars, but I'm distracted by the dog. I don't know. Okay, I mean, it's a nice little dog. He's riding in a backpack on his owner's back, who's riding a motorcycle, and he's wearing sunglasses. And it's just delightful. And why wouldn't you want to distract yourself with something this interesting and fun when, let's see. I don't know if there's any news today. Greg Dworkin seems to think that there's all this news. Major hurricane in Florida. Wow, that's not really news, is it? Okay, it is, especially if you're stuck there. And, Great Britain collapsing, something like that. I don't know. Financial collapse in the UK. Who would have predicted after Brexit that they would have financial difficulties, except for the people, half of the people in the last round of the balloting there kind of predicted it, actually. That wasn't the guy who won, so they gave it to the other one, and now things are collapsing. I don't know if they would have collapsed anyway, but the other guy claims that it wouldn't have, but that's politics for you. In the meantime, the collapse seems fairly real, and they're going to do what they can to stave it off, but apparently, that requires central bank intervention, and that usually, I guess, according to the people who know what they're talking about, who may not know what they're talking about at this point, but who usually are said to know what they're talking about. And you know what that means. They say, periods of high inflation and who knows what else, economic devastation, but, in a Western sort of a way. So who knows what that means? Loss in housing stock value, collapse of financial futures. I don't know. We'll find out. They don't know. They'll find out too. But lots of speculation about what will be happening there. Activity here at home. Politically, some movement, as a matter of fact, towards, first of all, they have to pass a continuing resolution, and they're working on that, and arriving at some consensus in the Senate, apparently, on electoral college reform. So that seems nice, too. It actually now has the backing of Mitch McConnell, who, as it turns out, doesn't very much like being kicked off the Senate floor and having to shelter in place somewhere because a mob of rioters are wrecking the place. And who can blame him? Let's see, other fun things, more developments in, more weird developments in court surrounding TFG. Maggie Haberman's book apparently still gonna go to print for sure and be released and everything. So that means that, we're gonna find out, 3 to 4 years after the fact about various other crimes that the former guy committed. Or I guess what the pattern that's emerging is, crazy things that he thought about doing that he didn't do, so I didn't tell you about when he was thinking of doing them, but now that he has finished doing anything and is just running around making a mess of things, I can tell you those stories. It's not clear to me. I haven't read the book. Never really likely to read the book, but that's not just because, Maggie Haberman or people are saving the stories for later. I just tend not to read those books because the good stuff is all excerpted and printed. And then if there's anything that's held back, intentionally to drive book sales, then when the book comes out, people then review that and tell that story. And then I learn it. And in much less painful fashion, quite honestly, taking it in little bits is a little easier. But I guess today also kookiness included. One of the headlines today from the Washington Post, I should probably just save it because Greg probably has these things tucked away as well. But the headline, or the eye-grabbing headline from this morning, Trump Wade bombing drug labs in Mexico, according to a new book, and according to, like I said, according to Greg as well. He probably put this one away. Hey, who cares what Trump Wade? No one knows what Trump weighed, really, honestly. His doctor, Ronnie Jackson, thought he weighed 239 pounds. So I don't take stories about what Trump weighed very seriously, but I could see him thinking about bombing drug labs in Mexico. That's the sort of thing that would occur to a guy like him, and he'd probably take it a little bit further, but, or down the road of exploring it. And I assume at some point somebody said, well, if you bomb anything in Mexico, I mean, it doesn't really matter what you choose to bomb in Mexico. You're bombing Mexico, and Mexico won't like it. Like if you decided to bomb, restaurants in Mexico in the vain hope that it would boost sales at Taco Bell outlets here in the United States, and you own 500 of them, then they would still advise you the same thing. First of all, that won't work, just generally speaking in terms of economics. But second of all, it doesn't matter what you bomb in Mexico. It's Mexico. You're going to end up having to explain to Mexico what you're doing. And who needs that? And I don't know exactly how they talked him out of it. Although they may have told him that it would blow up tacos and that he wouldn't have, taco bowls from Trump Tower on Cinco de Mayo anymore. And that may have done it. I haven't even read the article that saves me time reading the book yet, but maybe Greg has. That's what he's doing here. And, otherwise, even if he didn't have this story, we would still invite him in. It's been a while. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, good morning.
Hey.
Hey. I was the thing about Maggie Haberman's book, which I will also not read and not get, is that it apparently had information specifically about Trump saying that he had documents at Mar-a-Lago.
That's not as good.
And
right.
People were dumping all over Maggie Haberman for not telling anybody. The
Okay.
usual thing
Yeah.
of, oh, you had a book and you knew
Right.
stuff, and in a timely manner, it would have been great if you shared it, but you didn't. You
Yeah.
held on to it,
Which
so
is
you
no
could
different
make a
than
buck on your
others.
book. And that's no different than all the other people who did the same
Right.
thing,
Right.
including, those who worked
All the
in the
dudes.
Trump administration. So it's not just
True.
reporters.
True. It is kind of everybody that's another thing we've normalized. We probably shouldn't have, but we did.
Well, the reporters in the New York Times, of course, all made a circle of wagons around Maggie and said, it's not fair, all you people dumping on
Waggies
Maggie Haberman,
around
you're just
Maggie.
using her as a correlate, as a stalking horse because you really hate the New York Times and you don't like our political coverage.
Well,
And I read that and I said, well, things can be true at the same time.
yeah.
I mean, you could really dislike that Haberman did this and hate the New York Times political reporting.
Yeah. I
They
can
don't
see a
have to
way
be,
of doing
separate
that.
and distinct in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't single Haberman out in any particular way because there's plenty of people who are A, doing this, and B, are terrible.
Yeah,
But-
I didn't
but-
see this as being
but
better
they do
or
have
worse
bright
than anything
spots,
else.
I
but,
must say.
But the whole thing is just, it stinks.
Yes, I don't like the practice, that's for sure. On the other hand, I mean, the things that we finally do know, I mean, we know largely from her reporting and from other people's report. They run hot and cold is the best thing I could say about them.
But again, you have to step back and look at the bigger picture, I think.
Okay. Well, hold on
All
a
right.
second. All right.
Back in the mid-2000s, when I was blogging a lot about pandemic flu, and there were some very, very good reporters who were also talking about flu pandemics and preparation because the federal government was working on it. So it was a news story at the time. And I would go to various and sundry panels, CDC and other places like that, and present information about communication on pandemic preparation. And the reporters there, to a person, were tolerant but annoyed at bloggers because basically we were giving it away for free. They told me that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I love your
All right.
work, but I hate what you're doing because you shouldn't be giving it away for free.
But
You have to get paid. We have to get paid for this.
They do.
So
How
that's
much
the
were they
background.
getting?
So
Okay.
now, when somebody like Maggie Haberman saves up information and publishes it in a book, all the underpaid or think they are underpaid reporters circle around them and any criticism and say, we got to make a buck here,
That
we
is-
do this for a living.
that
This
is
is a
true.
professional job, and how dare you ruin this?
Well, they
that's
do
part
have
of
to
it.
get
You have to
paid.
factor
That is
that in.
true. I don't know how we come up with a model for dealing with that. Although
I don't know. I'm just saying it's part of their reaction.
Yeah, I guess
So
so.
she's making some money on it.
That's
you want
good.
to
I
see
don't
the
mind
same
that.
reaction? How dare you criticize people for being at Fox News? It's a news outlet. They're reporters just
Oh.
like us.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? It means it's another job slot, and you're trying to take it away with your criticism. We won't have that.
Yes. I don't know. I mean, there's getting paid and there's getting paid. Like, I don't know. Do you have to have a house in the Hamptons?
That's what I think. That's what you think. I'm just telling you what they think.
Well, what are they thinking that for? I'm over here thinking this.
They're thinking that
So are
whatever
you.
you do that helps you get a job and make a living is okay. If that's withholding information for your book, fine. If it's working on Fox News, which isn't really a news outlet, okay. I guess they draw the line at RT, maybe, but they didn't always.
Well, now they have to, I guess. But
Now they have.
well, what if we're getting paid for criticizing them?
Anyway,
Huh?
I'm just saying that's all part of the big picture. So
Okay. It was
I think
huge. I
they're
did
mostly
step
right in
back.
defending
You're right.
her, but there's also that part of it that's, don't jump on the gravy train here. We all need it. So anyway, that's not really the big story. The big story today,
No,
of course, is
it's
going to be
not.
the
What are you
hurricane.
talking about? Oh.
And, again, going back to pandemic flu days, I remember being on a panel with some nurses who were in New Orleans during Katrina, who reminded us that the single most important thing, if you make a go-to bag, where you can just grab and go, or
right, okay.
if you have extra supplies because you're sheltering in place, you need to have lots and lots of spare underwear. That's the thing that was the biggest shortage during the Katrina episode that they learned, I'm never doing that again.
Maybe just underwear.
Well, nobody wants to
need
be
to
wearing
save.
the same underwear for a week.
Right.
It's just the way it goes.
Okay.
Anyway,
Bring a washing machine.
so people are comparing this storm a little bit to Hurricane Charlie, which happened about 18 years ago or so,
Thinking.
because it also
Charlie.
hit a similar area and was also a Cat 4 storm. However, a couple of big differences. One of the things that made Charlie notable is that I think it was the second storm in 24 hours to hit Florida. So that was a big deal.
Oh.
But also, Charlie, I think, was geographically a smaller storm, even though it was a Cat 4. And perhaps more importantly, it hit at low tide. And this one, Ian, is much bigger, and it's going to hit at high tide. And that's bad. That adds another 2 feet or so to storm surge.
Stupid moon.
So, yeah, that was a book, right? Good Night, Stupid Moon. It was a famous book that
Yes.
recently had an anniversary.
That's
75
right.
years old or something.
Oh.
Anyway,
250.
so Stupid Moon means that the surge is potentially life-threatening. And, of course, geography doesn't help. Low-lying areas in Florida, but not just that. The Gulf has a very shallow shelf. And so when water comes in the shallow part and gets pushed up by the winds, it goes far. And then Florida has inland waterways and canals, which help it go even further inland. So it's a mess. It's going to be an absolute disaster. People are talking about the winds because this morning was 155, 2 miles per hour short of 157, which makes Category 5. But the difference between a 4 and a 5 at that point isn't really the thing that matters. What matters is going to be the storm surge. That's what does the damage. That's what kills people. And so, it's bad. So FEMA's getting ready. And, of course, Biden will be judged on his
Bureaucrats.
response, just like Bush was. And that's okay, but, prepare for this. And if you're not in Florida and you want to know what to do, you might want to start scouting out, World Kitchen and other places in terms of what are reliable places other than the Red Cross, who diverts money to wherever they want, to think about how you donate. Red Cross is better than nothing, but other local places are probably better than Red Cross. Which ones, we don't know yet. So we're going to have to keep an eye out for that.
Okay. Yes. Right. Well, we'll keep an eye on things as the eye comes upon Florida. How about that? It's an eye.
This is
It's an eye
where
job.
Ron DeSantis drops all his pretense about being an internet troll, and he starts being, this is not the time for partisan stuff, which is right. They all do it, but he's right. And so now you see what happens when the grown-ups are in charge. So Biden isn't threatening to withhold aid until DeSantis apologizes. He's not Trump. So FEMA's already down there, and they'll do whatever they need to do, and it's important and appropriate that they do. Gavin Newsom, who hates DeSantis, has said, will help in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Connecticut is sending
Sure.
lighting company and power folks down there because that's what you do. And, we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope not too many lives are lost.
Yeah. Caterpillar should send some bulldozers to level Mar-a-Lago to make an aid station for people.
On the White Power Hour, I see Tucker Carlson was mocking climate change and other
really?
overhyped
Oh, I didn't
things that
realize
just
that.
make you want to do
Jeez.
leftist things. And DeSantis had been doing that also. I don't like this climate change stuff. It's just an excuse to do far left things. All that drops during an
give us
actual
money.
emergency. Funnily enough.
Yeah, well, right. That's what they do. They reverse themselves for immediate political advantage if necessary. That wasn't even the worst thing that Tucker Carlson was doing yesterday, as it turns out. But we'll get to that later, perhaps.
Maybe.
I'll let you
I don't have
roll.
anything on that, so I'll leave
That's
that
okay.
to you.
I will roll on. Let's do your things.
Well, we're going to start with some judging election
I'll
stuff. You
probably
mentioned
forget.
that, and I think it's sort of important.
Okay, yes.
So first of all, at the sentencing of one of the January 6th defendants, says Politico, a federal judge says Republicans are afraid of contradicting Trump.
Okay, yes.
And this is Amy Berman Jackson.
What a
said former President Donald Trump had turned his lies about the election into a litmus test for Republicans. It's up to the judiciary to help draw the line against dangers. High-ranking members of Congress and state officials are, quote, so afraid of losing their power that they won't contradict them.
Yes.
That fealty, she said, comes even as law enforcement and judges involved in cases related to the former president are facing unprecedented threats of violence. And it's up to the judiciary to help draw the line. The judiciary has to make it clear it's not patriotism. It's not standing up for America to stand up for one man who knows full well that he lost. Instead of the Constitution, he was trying to subvert, said Jackson. In addition, Jackson said Trump and his allies are using rhetoric about the multiple criminal probes connected to Trump that contain dangerous undertones. Some prominent figures in the Republican Party are cagily predicting or even outright calling for violence, like Lindsey Graham, in the streets if one of the multiple investigations doesn't go his way, like Donald Trump.
Right.
So remember, can't lie in court.
Yeah, that's
She's
one
not
of the
lying.
weapons they have. So, yeah, she's doing a great job dealing with all of this stuff. I like the statement. And, well, very true. There are a lot of people who are, some who are violating their oaths of office in doing so, and some who are running on platforms that they will forsake the oath of office that they are supposed to take when they take it, telling you ahead of time.
And some lie
they're gonna
about who they
violate it.
stand, like Don Bolduc. You know, as soon as he
Yes,
wins,
right.
all of a sudden, no, I was not really an election denier, even though like a day ago I swore I would never abandon this. But now that I won the primary and I need votes in the middle, I'm abandoning this.
Yep, he goes back and forth.
Because I'm a principled
depending on
person.
The audience, right. So
And you can trust what I say.
for a minute or two, and then when I leave and go to a different audience or get questioned on things, right, I know I left all that behind, of course. Yeah, well, he's not unlike every single one of them. Actually,
Right,
I
exactly
guess.
right. So,
how else can I say it?
and again, there was a historian who was talking about the fact that you really have to separately write up the Mike Flynn's of the world, the military people who have gone national conservative. As you recall, national conservative is the one that say this needs to be a Christian country, and we have to make it clear that the separation of church and state is wrong.
Okay.
And we have to do things based on the Bible. And of course, the abbreviation for national conservatives is NATC.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
They were national socialists.
There's that. But there's more judging. There's more stuff. So this has to do with Judge Deary, who you may recall is the special secret probation master appointed by Judge Cannon, who got her head handed to her by the 11th Circuit for doing everything wrong.
Right. They gave it back to her.
They gave it back to her. They gave her head. And so she decided to hide the head by striking completely all of the references to the things that the appellate court said she got wrong. She didn't modify it. She struck it.
Yeah.
In striking it,
yes.
We talked about this on the show. She probably made it impossible to appeal to the Supreme Court because you can't appeal a thing that doesn't exist.
Right.
Yet,
that does make
by
a problem.
striking it, she also struck the instructions and recommendations to Judge Deary, who picked up on this because, as everybody's pointed out, he is a fellow magistrate judge who happens to have decades more experience.
I see.
So
He's a magistrate?
this is Ryan Goodman writing in Just Security, or writing on Twitter with a Just Security link to the actual comments here. Mar-a-Lago Special Master Judge Deary calls out Judge Cannon for clipping his authority to issue interim reports, which he writes was issued by Cannon implementing an unrelated ruling by the 11th Circuit. So Cannon struck Deary's ability to issue interim reports, and he kindly corrects her and recommends Cannon reinstate his authority. Okay, so Judge Cannon has issued a paperless order in response, suggesting the special master retains the authority to issue interim and other reports and recommendations. Remember, she has delegated to herself the final authority in all of this stuff. So nobody can do anything unless she says so. Yes. So she made the special master the special master, but in protecting herself, removed some of his authority. He said, when you did that, you probably erred by doing this. You really ought to correct that, dummy. But he said it nicely in legalese. And so she corrected it.
Yes. Well, I guess so. I mean, it's going to be real interesting to see. Usually you don't have to, rewrite those orders 3 times, especially if it's just, I really would like somebody else to do the work here.
Well, the legal eagles, the real sharp minds here, truly, I mean, the ones who are expert on this are all pointing out it's somewhat unusual for a special master to teach the judge how to do this.
Yeah, I mean, they do perform,
or as they say, it's extremely unusual on the part of a special master to instruct the judge as to how to write a proper order.
Yes. I thought she should have said in this second go round is, Deary says, well, I recommend that you reinstate
Resign.
Yeah, right. Well, that would have been a good recommendation too. But I recommend you reinstate my ability to make
and then get some experience
reports
before you come back and try this again.
That's one way of doing it. But yeah, I mean, I thought that she was going to say, I can't hear you. You don't have the authority to make this report that I need to restore your authority to make reports.
Well,
but no, she actually went ahead and did. Oops, my bad. I erased too much.
In so many ways, this whole runaround with Cannon is simply proof of your contention that it doesn't exist unless you actually see it on paper.
Yeah, right. And here she is doing this paperless nonsense as well. But Trump and paperwork, they just don't. They don't do it.
They get flushed down the toilet. So it's probably better it's paperless.
I guess so. But yeah, it is published, so
you cannot flush a paperless report down the toilet.
No matter
or
what
rip
kind
it
of
or rip it
toilet
into little pieces.
True. All right. So she's
who
made
would
this
do that?
mistake again.
Actually.
Oh, Wells. So, all right, we'll see what he does with his reinstated authority to issue interim reports about what? I don't know. I mean, she's still, I guess it still stands that she's erased his authority to what? Look at the classified documents, I guess.
Yeah, well, the classified documents are now in the hands of the government, so that's moot, as they like to say.
Oh, all right.
So let's turn a little bit to some election stuff. And I was looking at some big picture stuff this morning, try to figure out what the heck is going on. And what I wrote on Twitter this morning is my current theory of the confusing election as of this morning, with all rights reserved to change it by this afternoon.
All right.
It's confusing because the Democrats are campaigning on their issues.
Is that
abortion, defense of democracy, MAGA people are semi-fascists, to give you some examples. And the Republicans are campaigning on crime, immigration, plane loads of caravans.
Is that not their issues?
Those are their issues.
Yeah, okay.
But they don't overlap. There is no overlap, so you can't poll test which one is doing better on X because they are completely different worlds. And so there's no common issue to judge who's winning, and so it becomes confusing. And then you add on to that this whole dialogue we talked about last week. Polls are helpful because they ground you at least in some factual information, but you can't trust the polls because they always get it wrong. But here's the latest poll, and look what it shows. And so when you read that and then look at the fact that you have the two worlds campaigning against each other, And it's really difficult to figure out what's going on. So the other thing I wrote is I don't think the GOP particularly likes their party. I don't even think they like their positions. But I think they're all in on sunk costs because you can't let the libs win. And so we won't admit even to pollsters that we think any other way. And I don't know if that's enough to win because, like, look at Ohio. Like what's going on in Ohio, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked that because, for example, here is a Siena College poll came out just the other day. Tim Ryan, the Democrat, 46, J.R. Vance, 43. At the same time that DeWine, the Republican, is 55, and Nan Whaley, the Democrat, is 32. So it's not a Democratic favored poll. And the Chief Justice, which is going to be huge because Ohio has their justices up for election. Brunner, the Democrat, 40. Kennedy, the Republican, 40.
That's almost the
so it seems like a fair poll. And Ryan is leading is the point.
Yeah.
And Jacob Rubashkin, who tweeted this, pointed out we're about a quarter of the way through the Senate Leadership Fund's $28 million bailout of Vance. Vance has no money. Nobody wants to give to him. And Ryan is still right in the thick of it. His unfavorables seem to tick up a bit, but Vance is still much less popular. And the numbers on that, Ryan is 38-33 and Vance is 32-42.
Okay.
Biden's 39-58. So the point is everybody looks at Ohio and say there's no way a Democrat can win there, ignoring Sherrod Brown because it doesn't fit your narrative.
Okay.
Right. And so, there's no way Ryan can win. It's an R+8 state. As we've said, maybe it's a Trump +8 state because Tim Ryan is actually doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And what if he does go on to win? I mean, it destroys the whole thing about the narrative. And it turns out that the Democrats are actually doing okay, even for House seats, but certainly for the Senate, certainly for governors. We'll do that in a little bit more detail after the break. What we don't know is who shows up. And we'll have more about that after the break, too.
I guess so. All right. Time to call in those
That's
Italian
why it's so
military
confusing. Nobody really
settlements.
knows who's going to win.
That's usually the case. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It occurred to me I could be making a lot more money if I were broadcasting shows from a couple of years ago now. Now it can be told I've written a book. Here's what happened in 2018. And I have all the things all ready to roll.
So if you want to understand why people doubt when an internal poll is released showing X, you've just brought up a perfect example of why.
I am perfect at this. Excellent. Thank you.
Let's say you go through your old shows and only pick out the ones that show you were right, and those are the ones you broadcast.
Okay, good.
Then you could say, look at Kagro in the Morning and look how we always seem to get everything right years before it happens.
Yeah.
And you'd be not incorrect except for the fact that you left off all the times that you were wrong. That's what's wrong with internal polls released by campaigns. You know that probably that's what it shows, but what do the other ones show? What about the one that a week later showed that you were behind by 15 that you didn't tell us about?
Yeah, right. So they would just hide that one.
That's why pollsters have to release what they have at the time that they have it, and that's why they get paid. They don't write books, and so they don't save everything for later. It's just not It's not how the world works in this town.
But they write books. They write books ahead of time.
That's how things work in this town.
They say things like, "Well, although their book isn't about their polls per se, like who's winning, but everyone wants to come up with a term, You know, what are the moms in
Yeah,
suburbia
exactly.
doing now?
Soccer moms, security dads,
Right. I hate people who write books, moms,
Fox
maybe.
News voters.
Yeah, I don't know, but they don't seem to have the same monetization problems. Imagine if they did wait 4 years to tell you what happened in the election you just had. What good
Well,
would
you
they
know,
be?
here's some other information that we have thrown at us that is sort of weird that, you know, you got to fit this into the whole big context here. This is Tom Bonier talking about Kansas again. For those of you who aren't sick of hearing about this,
Kansas?
he says, this chart shows turnout rates among all registered voters by age and gender in the referendum in Kansas.
That one. Yes. Right,
and
right.
there's a J
That's
shape.
why we like
that means that the first bar is really high, then it dips down, and then it starts going up again.
Huh.
So the lowest voter turnout by age and gender, the lowest turnout was 25 to 34, 35 to 44 higher, 45 to 54 higher, higher still 55 to 64, highest 65 or above, sort of linear there. The older you get, the more you show up, except the 18 to 24s were the same as the 35 to 44s.
So where's the low point?
The low point is 25 to 34.
Think about that. Okay. 25 to 34. What were you doing that day?
Right. Young, but not that young. The youngest voters, especially women, they showed up.
Sure, of course.
This was an abortion referendum.
Yeah.
The point he's making is that, you know what, you're going to see that in other states too.
Okay.
So when you see people show up,
Same
especially
shape?
women, and you're going to think, oh, that's the student loan thing. No, it's not the student loan thing.
I wasn't going to think that probably, but okay.
18 to 24? Could be.
Yeah, I guess so.
25 to 34? Not so much.
I mean,
that's a
if
perfect
you'd
age
asked
too,
me
mind you, but
a year ago,
no,
yeah.
they weren't motivated. They were
Right.
motivated by Dobbs,
Okay.
Roe, whatever you want to call it.
25 to 30, where were they? They were
So
busy.
Tom Bonier says, I've been talking about the surge in women registering since Dobbs. This chart shows the turnout rate for all new registrants is highest in the 18 to 24. Only new registrants only. The highest percentage
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Was women
Yeah.
18 to 24.
Yeah, sure. The
Percentage-wise
people who just
higher
registered,
than any other age group. Very unusual.
Who feel it? Well, that's true. But yeah, these are people who are
Explainable,
motivated
but
while
unusual.
they register. Yeah. Ordinarily, you're registering because, well, you know, I'm 18 and it's a thing that I do, and I don't have any particular plans. I guess I'll cast my first vote, as opposed to people who are like, now I can't wait to turn 18 so that I can register. You'll probably not miss that first election.
Now, with all of Tom Bonier's data, you know, the retort to that is always, okay, well, you have to look at what is it usually,
You have to.
because otherwise, how do you make the comparison?
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
And we don't have that. But in those cases where he did have it, it's it really is something different.
You have to look at it, but we don't have it.
Well, we don't always have it. You know, he
That's
doesn't always
true.
publish
I mean,
it. You know, it's
you don't have it, you
again,
don't
it's
have it.
like
Just-
I'm only going to give you the Kagro in the morning shows that were right.
Right. Well, okay.
But you have to go back
Yes.
and look at the other ones too. So
But I don't have
the other thing is the new registrants is usually just a very small fraction of the total number of people who are going to vote.
Yeah. Right.
So that little group may look very favorable to you, and it's a good sign. It's a good omen. It's good entrails. You know, it's good knuckle bones. It's good I Ching. But the whole bigger pool of voters is what really matters. So
Yes. Talk
again,
to
there's some
people who are
encouraging
bored.
findings there. I'll give you another encouraging finding. And I think I had that somewhere in the pundit roundup, if I could find it.
Found twice.
But
now.
enthusiasm.
Oh my gosh! Wait a second. Yes,
Enthusiasm.
that's the thing. That's the word. Right. I got it already. Unless
Right. So
you want another word, I could. Okay.
So the those who are enthusiastic about voting. Well, let me put it this way. Cameron Easley is looking at Morning Consult. Good news for Democrats. GOP voter enthusiasm for the midterms
Enthusiasms.
Yes.
is on decline. Among GOP voters,
GOP
enthusiasm has dropped to
okay.
54 from 65 in mid-August. Democrats now have an enthusiasm advantage for the second week in a row and the fifth time in 2022.
All right.
So what that means is if you're looking at, well, it all comes down to turnout. Actually, this year it all comes down to turnout.
Okay.
Because their side is motivated by caravans and our side and crime. Crime, taxes, crime. It's funny, in Connecticut, they don't talk about crime. It's taxes, 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 taxes. And by the way, Ned Lamont lied about taxes, but also
Which is
taxes.
A crime. Okay.
Everywhere else, it's crime, especially in Wisconsin.
Well,
for reasons.
Thievery going on there, I guess.
You know what the reasons are?
Cheese also?
No. Mandela Barnes is woke. Which is the fancy way of saying black without getting,
Not wink, wink, crime.
It's your wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing.
Yeah. All right.
So it turns out, that may or may not be the motivating issue here. That's what I was talking about when I said everybody's talking in their own worlds there. But there is evidence that the enthusiasm for Republicans isn't what it was. And so, yes, the January 6th committee matters. And all the other stuff that you hear about, well, that won't really matter. That doesn't make a difference. It all matters. Everything matters. And, again, that's one of the reasons why it is so confusing. So let's look at some numbers and see where things stand. I should mention the money stuff. There's a lot of Republicans, like Doug Mastriano, and in Connecticut, unless you're funding yourself, Leora Levy, the person on the Republican side who's a nutcase running against Dick Blumenthal for Senate, they don't have any money, so you don't see their ads at all.
Yes. Okay.
And for example, this is on CNN, Pennsylvania Democrat John Shapiro, who's running for governor, raised $25 million this summer ahead of crucial governor's race. Mastriano has like $1.
Oh, well, maybe he'd like to give it away.
And so he just went up with his first ad.
Okay. What's it say? I only have $1.
I don't know, something like that. And so Mastriano's very upset that people aren't supporting him, which gives you an idea of what's going on. So our friends over at Daily Kos Elections have these numbers for this morning. Well, let's look at the governors first. Arizona governor, Suffolk University for Arizona Republic, Katie Hobbs, Democrat 46, Carrie Lake, Republican 45. Okay, so that's a close one. That's the one where the nutcase is doing okay. The abortion decision in Arizona, banning abortion based on a pre-state law, that is to say before Arizona was a state, that was enacted at a time that women didn't have the right to vote. Maybe a motivating factor there, so we'll have to see if polling comes out post that decision and see if that's effective. But that's the latest one we have in Arizona governor. Connecticut governor, Western New England University for Connecticut Insider and WFSB, Ned Lamont, 55, Democrat. Bob Stefanowski, 40, sets a 15-point lead. Stefanowski is going nasty because he's losing. Maine governor, I was a little surprised by this. University of New Hampshire poll, Janet Mills, the Democrat incumbent, 53. Paul LePage, former governor, 39. That's a pretty wide lead. Ohio governor, remember, LePage tends to win when the Democrats split their vote. Often they have a independent running. Okay. This year, the independent, Sam Hunkler, has won.
No.
That's like O-N-E, one.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well,
53, 39, 1.
1.
So he's not exactly
low,
splitting the Democratic vote this time, so it doesn't look like Paul LePage can sneak in.
Okay, that's good. It doesn't look like.
Now remember, Maine is complicated. It splits its electoral votes, so each district gets a vote, and then 2 for the state. So
yeah, but not this time.
Not this time, but for Maine, what happens with Biden is that he wins the South, he loses the conservative North, he wins the state, so he gets 3 out of 4 electoral votes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the idea that Maine is completely blue like Rhode Island isn't true, is what I'm saying.
Well, okay, right.
I expected Paul LePage to do better against Janet Mills, the Democrat, in this economic environment, with lobsters being
threatened. It's a good economic environment. Are they a shame at the supermarket?
They're an endangered species, so maybe you shouldn't fish them as often. Tell that to the lobster men.
They were $4.99 a pound at Harris Teeter this week.
So, that being the case, I just am surprised Mills has such a big lead, but she does. Ohio governor, Mike DeWine, we mentioned 55-32. Pennsylvania governor, insider advantage, a Republican firm, Josh Shapiro, 52-37. Pennsylvania Governor Marist College, more realistic, Shapiro 53, Mastriano 40. So he's got a double-digit lead, and Shapiro's up above 50 is the point. And even if the polls are off a little bit, Shapiro's going to win, Mastriano's going to lose. That's good news for America.
Okay.
That's on
I'm into
the
that.
governor's side. Okay. And in the Senate side, Arizona Senator, again, Suffolk University for Arizona Republic, Mark Kelly, 49, Blake Masters, 42. North Carolina, Sherry Beasley, 46. Ted Budd, 46. That's an internal Democratic poll. Ohio Senator, I don't know if it's internal, but it's a Democratic partisan poll. In May, they had 45 ties. So that one hasn't budged much. Remember, North Carolina is the state where when you see a lead like 2-3 points, it doesn't budge. You can't catch them. It's not like New Hampshire or Michigan where you can see a 10-point lead and it's gone.
Yeah.
Ohio Senator, Tim Ryan, 46-43. We talked about that, Sienna. That's their last poll of Ohio, by the way, for this cycle. Pennsylvania Senator, insider advantage, the same one that had a huge lead for Shapiro, only has Fetterman up 45-42. I'm not sure I believe that, but even, places like Rasmussen or Trafalgar, which are completely Republican leading polls, still have Fetterman in the lead, even though by smaller amounts. So I figure Fetterman probably wins by 5 and Shapiro probably wins by 10 or 11. That's probably it'll happen. Pennsylvania Senator Marist College, Fetterman 51, Oz 41. So the Democrats are doing okay. And by the way, there was even a story, probably in Politico, I don't know where it was, but I remember coming across it. Well, the Democratic bet on supporting far-right candidates appears to be winning right now.
Okay.
Which I always find annoying.
Yes.
Because Republicans chose these extremists. Democrats didn't choose these extremists. And you could make it sound like, well, the only reason the Democrats won is because they meddled in the Republican primary and made the Republicans pick an extremist who couldn't win. It's not like it was a fair fight or anything like that. It's not like the Democrat actually was better.
Okay. Right. You can't.
That's their theme,
that.
and it's pissing me off because it's not true. The reason that the Republicans pick the extremists is because Republicans are extremists. They want the extremists.
Yeah.
They keep voting for the extremists.
I mean, even if they were meddling in the thing, it's
Republicans
good for
are meddling in the Republican primary by running
points.
extremists.
Yeah, that's true. No one ever says anything about that. Why are they doing that? They should be running moderates, and then what would we do? How would our meddling work then?
Right. So they get you out of the, well, I don't want to talk about policy and democracy. I only want to talk about horse race.
Yes.
Because I know horse race. I don't know anything about policy. I don't know anything about democracy, and I certainly don't know anything about history.
Right.
I don't know what's right. I do know who's ahead. Let me talk about that.
Yeah. And you don't even really know that, but okay.
But that's their conceit.
They should wait a couple of years and write the book later.
Right. So, Wisconsin Republicans are lying about crime because Mandela Barnes is black. I can't say that. What I can say is Republicans are relying on crime because it always works for them. And so Ron Johnson is a point ahead.
Okay.
All right. Fine. I know what you're not saying.
Yeah. Well, Wisconsin crime, you know how it is. There's all these kids coming across the state lines with AR-15s. There's all sorts of problems with crime there.
Well, don't get woke on us.
Okay.
So, this also happened, and I think it's important. Mitch McConnell comes out in support of the Senate's bill to overhaul the Electoral Count Act, a bill to make it harder to overturn a presidential election. This will happen in lame duck, but it will happen. And it will happen with McConnell's support, and it will happen because McConnell despises Trump and vice versa. And they're calling each other names.
All right. Does he call Trump names?
Yeah. Well, he doesn't like to talk about Trump at all.
Well, yeah. This is like an exciting.
But what he says in private, you know
here.
the deal. Republicans won't say in public what they think in private.
I'm just wondering, like, I'm trying to imagine Mitch McConnell calling Trump names, but what would he even come up with? I don't know. All right, well, I don't have private conversations with him. I'll never know.
No, he'll say things. Well, I
Sinema.
understand why there was an impeachment.
Sure.
That's about as far as I'll go.
Okay. Well,
But yeah, so why didn't you vote for it?
I don't know.
Anyway,
Good
Electoral
good
Count Act
question.
in the Senate and the House have slightly different versions. The Senate first came up with one. The House came up with a better one. Now the Senate's trumping them and coming up with an even better one. For example,
this is the way it should work.
says American Progress says, for example, it would clarify that the vice president has only a ministerial role in counting the electoral votes. So it'll take Pence out of the loop and nobody will hang him or any future Pences. Close the loophole that allows state legislators to declare a failed election and potentially overrule the decision of the voters. That would be the risk for Kerry Lake in Arizona or Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, who would clearly do those things. Yeah. And Tudor Dixon in Michigan, who, by the way, is probably the worst candidate of the bunch, in a tough field. You know, it's hard to pick which one's worst.
Tudor Dixon worse
possibly Tudor Nixon.
How do we, a worse candidate? Like just
like she's running on the fact that Gretchen Whitmer had her life threatened with a threatened kidnapping and execution, and she makes jokes about it.
That seems bad.
And it's deliberate. And it doesn't help that she's like 15, 16 points behind in the polls. And she doesn't care. She's doing it anyway.
Because we don't have much to compare her to with Mastriano, since you're not allowed to cover his events. We don't know what he's campaigning on.
Well, probably kidnapping and killing Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like, I would ordinarily say, I don't know, he might be the worst candidate.
Normally,
he's
I
candidate.
Find myself
he's running on that.
Issues, but in this one case, I think it's,
Yeah. Well, it may only be because he's hiding the ball. So she's joking about it openly. He's probably telling people, I would like to kidnap.
I would have done it.
Democratic governors. I think that's a great idea.
I mean, she's not a woman, so it's not as much fun. But
okay, yeah.
So she's a terrible candidate, Tudor Dixon, and she's falling behind. Anyway, those are the kind of loopholes we're talking about here. Ensure an expedited judicial process to resolve disputes about the validity of electoral votes, so that we don't have an Al Gore 2000. Let's prolong this for longer than it needs to be. In addition, the revised version of the bill strengthens these protections. Perhaps most notably, it would ensure that courts could review whether a governor has appropriately certified a state's electors, provide for more expedited judicial review, and make clear that nothing in the bill impedes the important role of state courts in ensuring fair elections. Remember, there's a move on by ALEC and the Republicans to push something to the Supreme Court that says that state courts have no role in these federal elections, and you should stop them doing things like interfering with our gerrymandering and stop them from interfering with our vote counts and stop telling us to be fair and stop telling us we can't cheat. And this law, which will be passed over the objection of Ted Cruz, says, no, you can't do that.
All right. I mean, that's one of the problems we have with laws. People doing the things
one of the
that
problems
they say
we have with Ted Cruz.
But yes, right. Well, it's certainly an improvement. For lawless criminal Republicans, it poses an additional barrier that they can crash through, I suppose. But they'll be able to point to things.
Guardrails don't completely keep you from going off the road, but they make it a lot harder to get off the road.
I guess that's true. So you just got to build a heavier car.
If you're determined and you got a big 18-wheeler, as we say in this part of the country, a semi, whatever you want to call it, a lorry, and you want to go through those guardrails, you can.
Yeah, that's true. And they do want to go through them. And all right, I mean, it's a good idea. Put the law in place. Why not?
But strengthening the guardrails is a public safety feature, and so it's good that they do that.
And during the debate, you can say just that. Look, I want to do this. It will make it much clearer when people are doing wrong. I also want to make clear that they will do wrong. They intend to do wrong. The whole reason we're here is because they've been doing wrong. It's not that the laws were unclear before. They were breaking them last time, but we're going to make it clearer just how broken they get when Republicans try to do this thing.
And by the way, for those of you who are into these sorts of things, the actual committee that came up with this was the U.S. Senate Committee on Rules and Administration, bipartisan leadership, Amy Klobuchar and Roy Blunt.
Yeah.
So the fact that Blunt and McConnell are signing off on this, one of the reasons McConnell's signing off is Blunt did. But the fact that it comes out of that committee with those people means it's going to pass.
Very likely, I guess. I don't see any reason why that prediction would run into problems. Good. Fantastic. Yeah, that's how they handle those things over there. And their counterpart is in the House, usually the Committee on House Administration, for whatever reason, because they are the ones who provide for the electoral count. That's their jurisdiction, the electoral count in the joint session.
Yeah, I should mention before I forget, before we run out of time, that there will be no January 6th committee meeting today.
Oh,
it was postponed because of the hurricane. They don't want to compete with that, and it's postponed at least until next week because that hurricane is going to make a mess of Florida for more than just a day. Think Katrina. So, good move. You don't want to do politics when this is going on and people are getting killed.
Yeah, I see that. Although a week, well, all right. We'll see how the damage goes.
It's already Wednesday, so
yeah, right.
It's still going to be doing damage on Friday, so that puts it into next week.
Well, they want them to be able to see it on TV in Mar-a-Lago.
Well, yes, and so you have to have the power back.
Yeah. So okay. All right, well, too bad. I did hear that at least one of the members of the committee is from Florida and will want to be, if not at home, because you're supposed to be evacuated,
at least prepared to help.
Yes. And
but they are
FEMA
releasing, some clips from the Roger Stone documentary about him loving violence, to which he said, First Amendment rights, leave me alone.
Okay, well, that's fine. At least we know you said it.
Mm-hmm.
Put it in a book a couple years later.
Okay, last topic, which we'll just spend a few moments on, is Ukraine.
All right.
We have this pipeline, Nord Stream pipeline, which was sabotaged.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And people are thinking it's probably Russia.
It was Tucker
We know
Carlson.
that because Russia is saying it's probably the U.S.
Right. Tucker Carlson is saying it was probably the U.S.
Therefore, it was probably Russia.
Right.
Okay, so some interesting comments on that. Oliver Alexander has these observations. Just because he says it doesn't make it true. But it's interesting nonetheless. He's an analyst who publishes stuff, Washington Post and other places. I've seen a lot of tweets on the Nord Stream leak suggesting the West did it. If this were the case, there's some serious political implications. And I'll skip that because it would be awful, and so probably not true. Like it was an inside job by the Danes. I don't think so. On the other hand, Russia knows that both Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines are essentially valueless paperweights at this point, never having had a chance to be reopened to normal capacity. So destroying the pipeline sends a message about the threat to other pipelines, all without actually destroying infrastructure that would result in an immediate response in the West. So for my mandatory hot take, on top of the threat to other pipelines, Putin blew up Nord Stream 1 and 2 to ensure the reopening of these could not be used as a bargaining tool with the West for anybody who wants to usurp him inside Russia, effectively removing a lifeline for anybody wanting him gone. You can't threaten to get rid of Putin and reopen Nord Stream to normalize things when Nord Stream doesn't exist anymore.
If I can't have it, nobody can.
Yeah. Anyway,
all right, interesting. It's a
pretty interesting, I thought.
Yeah. Well,
okay. At a British Academy conference on the Russia-Ukraine war, Phillips O'Brien tweets, fascinating talk. A majority of Ukrainians were desirous of good and friendly relations with Russia, like in places like Mariupol. So what the Russians did is decimate the areas that were most likely to agree with them, essentially pushing them to favor Ukraine. Brilliant move. Okay.
Yeah,
in the other session, early on, Russia was quite successful in establishing red lines limiting escalation of what NATO would do. But Putin's not a madman, doesn't want to escalate to nuclear weapons. Mobilization shows that it's an attempt to maintain a strictly conventional war. So let's hope that's true.
Right.
By the way, one of the funniest things is, Julia Davis often shows RT Today or their equivalent in Russia, where the pro-Putin people sit around and talk about what's going on in Russia, and they get very agitated and start yelling at each other. It's really fun to watch. And now they're very upset, and she wrote an article about this. Putin's top cheerleaders panic over Russian army mutiny. They're very upset that the Russian army in Ukraine wants to pull back from places like Kherson. They're upset about how the mobilization's going poorly, and that poorly reflects on Putin, so that upsets them. So that's basically what's going on within Russia. but somebody took one of these shows where Julia Davis will often add the subtitles so you can see what's going on.
Yeah, I worry about whether they're accurate sometimes, but
and added a satirical subtitle about the blustery host of the show getting called up by the army. And it's absolutely hysterical. These people
funny.
show up at my place, and I looked at them and said, "What's going on here? Don't you know who I am?" And they said, "Here's your contract. You have to go." I can't go. I'm too old. I would go in a minute if I could. And one of the other people said, "You're not going because you're a coward and you're too fat." And it just goes back and forth with insults, and it's really hysterical. And the point is that they're getting accurately what the elites in Russia really think. You don't send me. I don't go. Send those artists. Send the street artists. Send the students. Get the ethnics to go. I'm not going. Huh. Yes, that's exactly what's going on. And it's funny because it's true, even though they didn't actually say this.
That is pretty amazing. I did see something the other day. I think Marcos was retweeting it too. It was a story of a guy who was tweeting his outrage at having been turned away at the border with Georgia because he was driving into Georgia, presumably to escape the conscription, but he had a big Z painted on his car, as was the fashion not that long ago. He tied an onion to his belt and painted a Z on his car and tried to get across the border, and they turned him away. And he was outraged that just because he had this Z supporting the war effort that they would turn him around. And don't you Georgians know it wasn't that long ago that we, crushed you with our tanks and we'll get you. So he's threatening military action on behalf of the Russian government, which he's not, against Georgia. But who's going to drive the tanks because he's running away, trying to hide in Georgia? It's a very interesting thing. So even at that moment, they feel entitled to threaten others with military action, even as they refuse to take part in that military action.
So I'm not saying that the war is going badly for Russia in Ukraine, but the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Group claims that Russia is using retreat-blocking detachments to prevent Russian forces from retreating. And who's going to be in those detachments? The new conscripts who are going to be given nothing. Get your own sleeping bag and bubble wrap and go to the front.
Okay.
Because they're being told you have nothing. If I were you, I'd get some Tylenol and a tourniquet. So at least you have something when you're out there.
Right, yeah. Well, they
Good
can't
luck,
retreat
and
because there's no
we'll
tires.
see if they come back.
Okay, see you tomorrow. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We had lots to say. There's still more. And it's always hard to say goodbye, but it's easier when you know that Thursday is still coming. It's tough, especially if you've been off the air one of the days. It's an outlet, right? And we have all these stories to share, and then we wanted to talk a little bit more. We need a longer break after the Greg segment, so we can properly get through all of the other discussion that we need to have. Anyway, I did mention to you that, what's his face? Tucker Carlson. I knew I would get back around to that. Did in fact spend a considerable, I guess, I don't know. It wasn't that long. I just saw it in a video clip. So how long could it really be? But he did spend some time speculating about the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. And it was really quite bizarre how he spent his time. I guess I can open it up and then pocket it and play you this clip. It's only about a minute long. And what's remarkable about it is he's on there parroting, it shouldn't surprise anybody that he's sort of carrying water for the Russians and parroting their propaganda line because, of course, he spins it in a way. This is interesting because normally, conservatives would ordinarily say, we find ourselves at loggerheads with Russia, and there's a war in Ukraine, and we're having we're fighting the war in a proxy sort of way. Not really, not the way we usually do it, but in supplying weapons to the Ukrainians and in supporting them, we're having this proxy war. And ordinarily, you used to, back in the day when things were predictable anyway, conservatives were predictably anti-Soviet, anti-Russia when it comes down, whenever we have foreign policy objectives that are in conflict anyway. But lately, of course, with the arrival of Trumpism, you can no longer tell exactly what they're going to do. And unless, I mean, I don't know. I guess you can, actually. I hesitate to say, for some reason, that they are predictably pro-Russian, but they really are. And we should just admit that at this point. And so it should come as no surprise that he's carrying Kremlin water here and repeating the allegations that it was the United States that blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, which also, like I was saying, this is what I was trying to get at, would normally be something that the conservatives would cheer about. Yeah, military action or, at least military style action, even if it's covert action carried out by non-military actors, it would be, striking a blow with explosions. What could be better? No Republican could like anything better. Striking a blow for United States projection of power into the sphere of influence of the Russians and doing it with explosions. I guess the only thing that would bother conservatives about it is that fossil fuels aren't being sold as a result, and they're instead, but they might in fact just cheer about them leaking into the sea because that will own the libs. Even MAGA can get behind that. But at any rate, it's odd that he would choose to go on his show and insist that not only that it was the United States that did this, but that it was a bad thing that they had done this, and essentially suggesting for the Russians several ways in which they might retaliate against the United States, which has not in any way, shape, or form acknowledged or even hinted that they were responsible for this. And in fact, as you would expect, they're denying it because, and possibly because, no, they had nothing to do with it. And it would be, Greg gave us the theory on why Russia themselves would want to do it. And one of the, part of the theory would call for the Russians not only doing this to themselves, but, planning from the start to blame the Americans. Let's do something that we can blame the Americans for so that we can escalate the war in some way. But there's just an odd way of doing it here for Tucker Carlson. So let me play it. It's about a minute long. Maybe I'll interrupt it once or twice just so we don't draw too much attention from the crazy YouTube scanners who knows what they'll do with this one. But let me, I should probably turn up, remind me, I'll turn up the volume on Firefox, but on the soundboard, but remind me to turn it back down again because the same volume slider applies to Skype, and then tomorrow Greg will come in thundering like Thor himself on Thor's Day. Very appropriate, but we'll see if I can remember to turn it back down. All right, let's see. Over to Pocket. I already feel myself forgetting. It's slipping away. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Here we go. Here's the clip that circulated most widely. Another one of the people who have made a Twitter career of circulating video clips. ASIN, right? Always on top of things here, along with, the other guy who does it. Aaron Rupar, is that right? All right. Let's see. Do I have the sound all turned up? Here we go. It kind of jumps in mid-sentence, but the important sentences come next. So here we go. He's on screen with his famous befuddlement scowl, and behind him is those graphics that they stick up behind you. This is an interesting one, to illustrate the show. It says War Machine, and it's got a black and white photo of the United States Capitol on it. Like War Machine. I mean, it's very Russian style, very old Soviet style even, propaganda. What's interesting about it, of course, is he usually does his show against a backdrop of, a bluish evening sky with the U.S. Capitol over his right shoulder. So this is just an interesting visual in that he's got the Capitol over his right shoulder, which usually is there, as the backdrop to impart the sort of, give heft to the broadcast. It's coming from Washington, D.C. This is, and I'm a patriot, and here's a big picture of some sort of Washington type icon, and that is supposed to lend me authority. At the same time, over my right shoulder is a scarier looking black and white rendering of the same building saying, War Machine, growl, roar. How terrible this building is and how terrible the United States government is. It's kind of weird, and they might want to rethink what's the backdrop. I mean, why not put the Kremlin in the backdrop, or St. Basil's Cathedral? Probably the more recognizable red square iconography. Anyway, all right. Well, let me play this 1-minute clip here, and you'll get some idea of how he was doing this.
Action has a reaction.
Every action has a reaction. He's talking about, and they flip the graphic here to sabotage in red lettering, and then with a picture of. It's funny. I guess it's a picture of the gas bubbling up to the surface where the rupture in the pipeline is, but it actually looks more like a satellite photo of maybe the hurricane that's bearing down on Florida. It's very, it's not a shape that's recognizable to people. No one knows what it is, but he's introduced the segment. So every action has a reaction, and then he fills out the old phrase and then launches into his stupidity.
And opposite.
Equal and opposite reaction. Right?
Blow up the Nord Stream pipelines? Okay, we've entered a new phase. One in which the United States is directly at war with the largest nuclear power in the world.
All right, sure. So he's declaring war on our behalf. Thanks very much. We really appreciate that. Maybe that's the reason for the picture of the Capitol behind him. Only Congress declares war, or Tucker Carlson, as long as he's got a picture of Congress behind him. So, okay, there you go. Now, of course, it would be more in the United States' interest not to be directly at war with Russia, which would be why you would disclaim any, having anything to do with the destruction of the pipeline, but not for Tucker Carlson. He's doing this to be able to say, if he could drive it to the brink of war or even across the brink of war, then he would be able to say, Biden is a terrible guy and he shouldn't be president, and how irresponsible of him. He forced us into war with Russia, and now it might even be a nuclear war, and this is his fault, except he didn't do the thing, but I went on the TV and said he did do the thing, so that Russia could say, see, even Tucker Carlson, conservative, will say something, and it will make no sense because they don't really understand our politics that well, but okay. Anyway, there you have it. So he now says, okay, we're in a new stage. We're in active war with Russia, the biggest nuclear power on the planet. Great. Good job, Joe Biden, except none of this is happening.
Doesn't mean it'll go nuclear immediately, but it does suggest there could be consequences. If we actually blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, why wouldn't Russia sever undersea internet cables? What would happen if they did that? What would happen if banks in London couldn't communicate with banks in New York? Just that one piece of it, leaving aside its potential effects on our power grid. But let's just say the banks couldn't communicate with each other for one day. What would the economic effect of that be?
I don't know. Why would we speculate on that? Because, of course, we didn't blow up the Nord Stream pipelines, and Russia may or may not retaliate against us, given that we didn't do the actual thing. And what would be the effect? And one of the interesting things, of course, would be people like Tucker Carlson, who just have familial wealth, I guess you could think you might see some of that suffer or disappear or evaporate, but I don't really know how. But who knows? But it's interesting speculation for a Russian, just not for the United States. Quite honestly, I mean, the only thing I can come up with as to why he's doing this is that Tucker Carlson blew up the Nord Stream pipelines and needs everybody to blame the United States, military or otherwise, for doing it, rather than, because if Russia finds out that he blew it up, they'll kill him. So, what a good thing to do is blame it on the United States. And an easy way to to be blamed on the United States would be to suggest fantastic, fun sabotage actions that Russia could take that would, I don't know, own the libs, I guess. I don't know why he's suggesting these things. There's a little bit more.
Oh, we would cascade downward into your house. We could have an actual collapse. We could wind up very quickly in third world conditions. Those are the stakes. Have the people behind this, the geniuses like Toria Nuland, considered the effects? Maybe they have. Maybe that was the point.
The level of speculation involved here is really incredible. So he's decided who the masterminds, the geniuses were behind this, even though No one has figured that out yet, but he's assigned it to somebody, and I don't even know who the hell he's assigning it to. Is that a national security advisor here in the United States? I couldn't even make out the name exactly that he was blaming for it. Have they considered the implications? Probably. If they can occur to Tucker Carlson, they can certainly occur to anybody. But have you considered the implications of simply stating for a fact on American television that the United States did sabotage the pipelines and that these would be particularly devastating ways for you to strike back? Oh, it'll reach into your house too, Tucker Carlson. But more importantly, someone should reach into his house and pull him out of it and hold him responsible for this. It's an extraordinary thing to do with your time, I must say. And that's pretty amazing. And the little bit of speculation at the end there. What was that again? Let me replay the last couple seconds.
Is like Tory and Newland considered the effects? Maybe they have. Maybe that was the point.
That's it. Maybe they have considered the effects. The effects being, have you considered the effects? You might cause worldwide economic collapse and possibly a nuclear war as well. Have they considered it? Maybe they have. Maybe that was the point. Yes, they wanted to provoke a worldwide economic collapse and cataclysmic nuclear war. Therefore, you should watch this show, which is awesome and totally has high ratings and advertising on which will continue, and it will just be a continuing income stream for me despite the economic collapse. All these things, you go down in this too. And also it's not real, so maybe not saying this would be better. I don't know. It seems pretty interesting. Seems like somehow beyond what his normal rhetoric is all about, and worth keeping an eye on. Now, it's almost impossible. I can't construct a real scenario in which I think Tucker Carlson actually engineers the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines. I just don't see it, but okay, because, he's just a person and he doesn't have governmental resources behind him and nobody in government is listening to him. So I don't know why anybody would do, but one explanation for this kind of wild speculation about it, not only about who's responsible, but for how Russia could have its revenge. Hint, hint, do these things and destroy us. Why? Well, why foreshadow it? Why suggest it? I don't know. One stupid theory is he's trying to distract from his own guilt and all this, but he doesn't have any. So I don't know what he's doing other than, the only other explanation. I guess the more realistic of the explanations is, he thinks it will hurt Biden if Russia retaliates in some way. So he's creating a case for that retaliation so that Biden will look bad for having been retaliated against. Even though the retaliation A wasn't warranted, I'll make it look like it was warranted. That way it will be more likely to happen. People will die. People will suffer. Fortunes will be lost because Tucker Carlson wants to own Biden. It would be an interesting outcome for which people would be probably fairly justified in pushing him through a wood chipper. I don't know why they, who knows what motivates one to push a television host through a wood chipper? I don't really know for sure. I don't recommend it. You ought not to do it. It's bad for the hosts. It's bad for the chippers, the whole thing. Bad all around. No one really likes it as an outcome. However, he's out there. He's doing some weird stuff. I don't know why, and I don't even know if it's particularly pro-Russian either. I don't know whether they'd be happy to be rid of him in the end anyway. So that may be how he goes out, through a window, a high window somewhere once they're done using him. Yep, very interesting. Like I said, just a bit of an oddity, and not usually where an American television host would be likely to go. Okay, probably time to move on from this. I just found it rather extraordinary. Other things that we might want to discuss. Let's see. There was, the Washington Post has its write-up of what they've gleaned from the latest preview of the Haberman book, and I suppose we should put that on record here. I began the show in mentioning that Trump had at some point Wade bombing drug labs in Mexico after he mistook after he mistook advisor, new book says. Okay. That is a new and different headline, I think. Yeah, it said according to, before it had said according to new book, I guess. But now they've refined it a little bit here. Whoa, what is happening here? This is an interesting... I've missed my chance to take a look at the very interesting banner ad that I had. An electric car of some kind. It looked pretty fun and cool, and maybe not actually available on the market or anything like that. Not surprising. Anyhow, what about this Trump Wade bombing drug labs in Mexico thing after he mistook advisor? Let's see what that is about. The 607-page confidence man from New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman. I probably should be looking to the New York Times for their coverage of what's in the book. But who cares? This is what's available now. Oh, hang on just a second. All right. Well, I'm in an awkward position here. What do you do when entering into the reading of a lengthy article and you suddenly feel that, hey, I've got to sneeze? Well, you hit the sneeze button here, or the mute button, and then the mute button having been hit, psychologically all the urge to actually have that sneeze goes away, and then here you are stuck explaining why you turned the microphone off. Okay. Where were we? Right. The 607-page confidence man from Maggie Haberman details unusual and erratic interactions. Erratic. Just don't want to scare you. What kind of interaction is this? Erratic interaction between Trump and world leaders, members of Congress, and his own aides. What? I can't believe it. Erratic? That's so strange. Who would have predicted it? Josh Dawsey is responsible for the reporting of this nonsense. Damn it. As president, Donald Trump Wade bombing drug labs in Mexico after one of his leading public health officials came into the Oval Office wearing a dress uniform and said, let's bomb some crap. Oh, what happened? He came in wearing a dress uniform and said such facilities should be handled by putting lead to target. To get it, that's lingo, right? Ooh, that's so like G.I. Joe of you. Lead to target. To stop the flow of illicit substances across the border into the United States. We should shoot up drug labs. But why not bomb it? With lead, I guess. He raised it several times, eventually asking a stunned Defense Secretary Mark Esper whether the United States could indeed bomb the labs, according to a new book by New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman. White House officials said the official, Assistant Secretary for Health, Brett Giroir, was that how he pronounced that name? I don't know. Giroir, often wore his dress uniform for meetings with Trump, which confused him. What? I'm confused too. Assistant Secretary for Health wore his dress uniform. Was he is it, I don't know. Is that like a surgeon general type person, or are we talking about somebody who had military experience, who was no longer in the military but had the uniform? I'm confused by all this. Well, let me look this person up here. Brett Giroir. Before I go on, I don't know what's happening here. Maybe they explain it later on. Brett Giroir, American pediatrician, is how he's described just quickly in the Wikipedia. And there he is in the uniform and everything. Okay, so yeah, a U.S. Public Health Service person. So let's see. And a pronunciation. Pronounced Giroir. So a little closer to where Brett B. Giroir is an American pediatrician and a former 4-star admiral in the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps. Okay. Dr. Giroir serves as CEO and a member of the board of directors for some biosciences company, I guess now. Who cares about all that stuff? Yeah, here we are. He's previously served as the 16th Assistant Secretary for Health during the Trump administration from February of 2018 through January of 2021. He concurrently served as the Secretary's principal public health and science advisor, the senior advisor for the Health Resources and Services Administration, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, as well as the senior advisor to the Secretary for Opioid Policy. And so therefore accomplished nothing in all 5 categories here, or whatever it is. From 20 to 21, he served additionally as director of the U.S. Coronavirus Diagnostic Testing and as the U.S. representative to the World Health Organization Executive Board. As COVID-19 testing czar, he was part of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. From 2004 to 2008, he served as deputy director, then director of DARPA's Defense Science Office, vice chancellor for the Texas A&M University System, and so some connection to Texas A&M as well. All right, impressive record and everything. Here's a picture of him in his dress uniform, which, okay, and he used to show up for meetings in dress uniform, and Trump took that for being, he is, do I understand this correctly? So, he's an admiral, but does he actually pull military weight? I understand that he's, a military officer and a military medical officer, and by virtue of his post, holds military rank as well. But does he also, let me look down here, uniformed services, awards, and decorations. So, does he come up through the military ranks and also work in public health, or does he come up through the public health ranks and holds a military position by virtue of that? Oh, let's see. Here's his awards. That doesn't tell me a great deal, but I don't see battle ribbons. So what am I looking at? Field Medical Readiness Badge, Public Health Distinguished Service Medal, Public Health Service Meritorious Service Medal, Surgeon General's Medallion, Public Health. Never, it's not like combat stuff or command ribbons. So I've never been entirely clear on how that whole, thing works, and whether they select military people for the job, or whether if they select civilian people, do they then assume a military rank, not by virtue of having come up through the military as well as working in public health, but rather by virtue of the position. So I don't know. At any rate, that's not really what this is about. Although I think it plays into this. Who can blame Trump for being confused if I am also confused? However, as President of the United States, I would have asked the question, please explain to me exactly what this is all about. Is Giroir a military guy working in public health, or a public health guy who, by virtue of being the public health guy, gets a military rank but really has no military background? Well, at any rate, he becomes confused too. It says a guy in uniform says this, so it must be militarily possible. But he did have the good sense to ask the acting Secretary of Defense, am I wrong about this? And he said, yeah, you are. So, okay. But still, it's interesting. And then I guess he continues to pursue it, which is amazing in its own right, just because normally, okay, is it militarily possible to bomb something like that in Mexico? Sure. Obviously, you can deliver bombs anywhere. That's the whole point of having our military. But that it would even never, occur to him. Well, that's just fantasy. You can't just go bombing neighbors, allies, really, at this point. We have a weird relationship with Mexico, I will say, but you can't just go bombing them because you don't like what's happening there. It's not up to you. And do you really need to ask the Secretary of Defense whether or not you can do this? No. All right. Well, at any rate, so Giroir often wore his dress uniform for meetings with Trump, which confused him and now confuses me as well. The response from White House aides was not to try to change Trump's view. Can't do that. But to consider asking Giroir not to wear his uniform to the Oval Office anymore. That's an interesting solution. That's what Haberman writes in Confidence Man, an extensive book about Trump's time in New York and as president. The 607-page book, which now the report on which becoming considerably less interesting all of a sudden, and has long been awaited by many of Trump's aides, is set to be published Tuesday. Is that next Tuesday? I guess so. A copy was obtained by the Washington Post. It was probably mailed to them along with a note that said, "Here, read this and review it," signed Maggie Haberman. The book details unusual and erratic interactions. We said that before. That was in the subheader. Presented with a detailed accounting of the book's reporting, a Trump spokesperson did not directly respond. Something Yargle Bargle coastal elites apparently made it into Taylor Budowich's statement to the press on that. And all right, maybe we'll skim over the next 2 minutes and see whether there's anything worth bothering you with next. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the show. You know which one it is. Where was I? Oh, yes, right. I left in the middle of reading through the latest in the excerpts from the Haberman book, and there was something of some interest after skipping past the stuff that's not of any interest, with Taylor Budowich saying, how dare you, something, liberal elites. We got to this part here. Throughout the book, Trump is portrayed as transactional and narcissistic, at times charming and at other times cruel, but always attuned to his own political fortunes, no matter the issue. Nothing new and exciting there. But, oh yes, right. And in this paragraph, part of what I skipped was something that Greg mentioned. I just wanted to reiterate this bit. Haberman interviewed Trump 3 times for the book, many times before that, of course, in which he claimed to not have taken any important documents from the White House, among other statements, so that could pose some real complications for him in court. And it includes his written answers to her questions. The book delves into some of the most contentious episodes of his presidency, including the impeachment trials, the weeks after the election when he tried to overturn the results, and his mishandling of the novel coronavirus, among other topics. Let's see. Narcissistic, at times charming, at other times cruel, but always attuned to his own political fortunes, no matter the issue. During his meeting at the Oval Office with Barack Obama in 2016, he eschewed policy and asked Obama how he kept his approval ratings high, according to the book. He told advisors that he needs to meet people such as, for instance, now Pennsylvania Senate nominee Mehmet Oz, in office in case the election is challenged in 2024 or they tried to impeach him again. Okay, so he's already preparing the groundworks for, his 3rd impeachment? Is that what's up? When Trump first met British Prime Minister Theresa May, he soon turned the conversation to abortion, because why not? Some people are pro-life, some people are pro-choice. Imagine if some animals with tattoos raped your daughter and she got pregnant, he said, according to the book. Pointing to then Vice President Mike Pence, he described him as the tough one on abortion. That is interesting. I'll get to the next point, or the point that they're really bringing up is next, but it's an interesting thing just to bring up. That's just extraordinary diplomacy. Imagine if some animals with tattoos raped your daughter. And, you don't know exactly what he's thinking about that. Like, that'd be crazy. We would hate that. Or maybe we'd like that. I'm not really sure exactly. But the point, and the interesting thing is he's trying to get around to is what? Like, imagine that happened. then wouldn't you want your daughter to be able to get an abortion? I don't understand where he's going. I mean, he might be saying that's an exception, and even I'm tough on abortion, but I would accept that because that's very Trumpian, right? He would absolutely, you would think, certainly if you confronted him with it and said, suppose somebody, attacked and raped one of your daughters and they got pregnant, wouldn't you want them to be able to get an abortion? Of course, absolutely. That's why we have I assume he supports those exceptions. And I guess that's what he's saying. Look over here, he's the tough one on abortion. Pence would say no, is what he's trying to say. Or he's trying to set him up for saying that so that he can look, reasonable by comparison. But what does she care about American abortion policy? Nothing. He just doesn't know what else to talk about. So, I don't know. He just wanted to talk about raping Theresa May's daughters, I guess, or somebody else doing it anyway. Not that I would sneak in during their changing or anything like that. I'm just saying, All right, whatever, weirdo. He soon moved on to the topic away from Northern Ireland. And how was it the topic? I mean, were they talking about abortion in Ireland? I mean, I guess that's a possibility because it did come up as an issue, but I mean, whatever. He soon moved the topic away from Northern Ireland to an offshore wind project that he wanted to block near his property, the book says. His golf property, I guess, in Scotland. Is that it? That's, amazing all by itself. But then following it up, or having it be the follow-up, imagine your daughters are attacked. Imagine that. And another thing, what about my golf? Wow. All right. Trump was often crass and profane, do you think, with world leaders and others in his orbit. He referred to German Prime Minister Angela Merkel as that, and they used the print version of the censoring horn here by using the dashes to dash out the rest of the letters in the B word. Oh my God, not the B word. Yeah. That's when you would think that they could actually print. I don't think they're going to get in trouble for printing. What I assume is that bitch, but why? I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm scrambling to see. Is there something that they really actually would have to censor that starts with a B? I don't know. Has that number of letters? Who knows? Well, anyway, apparently that's scandalous. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg was dying in 2020, the book says, Trump would sarcastically raise his hands to the sky in prayer, which no matter what he's praying for, it's sarcastic, believe me, and say, please, God, please watch over her. Every life is precious, before asking an aide, how much longer do you think she has? He's a nice guy. When former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie pressed Trump to more forcefully condemn white supremacists, particularly avowed white supremacist David Duke, during his 2016 campaign, Trump said he would, but he was in no rush. A lot of these people vote, Trump said, describing some of the white supremacists before ending the call. Okay. Wasn't it in 2016 he was saying, I don't know who David Duke is? Even after the fact that he had spent years before discussing David Duke. But okay, whatever. The book shows Trump frequently praising Russia and its president, Vladimir Putin, for his strength, and even laughing when aides grew mad that he tweeted a proposal for a joint cyber unit with Russia that would have effectively let the Russians, this isn't him speaking, that would have effectively let the Russians into U.S. investigations of hacking, Haberman writes. Yes, that was a bad idea. In another part of the book, Trump shows his lack of care about classified markings. Is that important now? Aides tried to stop Trump from tweeting a photo of an Iranian facility until they could remove classified details. I remember that, Haberman writes. But he liked how the image looked and proceeded. If you take out the classification, that's the sexy part, he told aides, she writes. Yeah, well, right. What can I say? And of course, he discusses it in terms of being sexy, naturally. Yes, it's metaphorical, but actually it's not that metaphorical because I just took this, all right, whatever, anyway. In 2019, Trump seeming not to understand how the branches of government work, I think he could probably definitively say that he didn't understand how the branches of government worked, said he could simply sue Congress if they tried to impeach him. Okay. And as Trump played down, I'm starting to say everything in a Trump voice. As Trump played down the coronavirus in early 2020, he privately acknowledged its severity and cast himself as the victim, according to Haberman's book. Can you believe this happened to me? He said, fearing the political impact on his presidency. And I did say the same thing. Can you believe this happened with Trump in office? I mean, if anything will illustrate for you the importance of actually having somebody who's a decent person, even if not a particularly competent one, in office when a pandemic strikes. I mean, our pandemic response, it could have been so, you have no idea. We probably have an idea, but most people probably have no idea how much different this could have been because, you know, it struck everywhere and the numbers are huge, etc. But I think the numbers are huge here and around the world because of the laxity of the response and the foolishness, the idiocy of the response. I think there's hundreds of thousands of Americans who might find in long term that they have some debilitating condition or illness because he didn't want to smudge his makeup. He didn't want to smear the makeup on his face with a mask. That's all it comes down to. Millions and millions and millions of people around the world, because of American non-intervention in all of this and just refusal to take this thing seriously, because they don't do any long-term planning and they don't do any, they never take cautions about things. And so regulation ahead of time so that you can head off, you know, downstream effects is just not a Republican thing to do. But on top of it, he's a total idiot and you know, an egomaniac. And like I said, I think the whole thing is, the bottom line is millions of people may find themselves disabled in the future or, you know, in some way permanently impacted because I don't think I look that good in a mask and my makeup gets smudged on and I look very weak and I can't have that because something. And then thank God he was out of office a few years later and it was all for nothing. But think about all the people who will be ill forever because of this. Anyway, and him, can you believe this happened to me? It is bad luck, I must say, that you were in office when this happened. In detail, Haberman reports how Trump was fearful of dying and how his condition grew worse in the White House. And again, biggest mistake, biggest medical error in American history was the doctors at Walter Reed working seriously to save his life when he had COVID. Nothing. You want to talk about how we would have clamped down and how we would have tried to get a lid on this thing. I mean, it was already too late to contain the disease, and maybe this disease was just never going to be contained. I think that's the basic nature of it. But I think response to the virus in the United States and then therefore around the world, and I mean, you know, it's self-centered to think that the United States is going to drive the whole thing. But look, that's I think the reality of things. But, and there was a concerted effort on searching for a vaccine. That I don't have any doubt about. That's actually something I wouldn't say that he handled well necessarily, because I just can't give him credit for it. He just opted not to get in the way of government response to driving vaccine searches. I don't think he did anything extraordinary. I mean, there are things that could happen that if you are desirous of crediting him, you can credit him with. But it really comes down to not getting in the way of the rest of the government's efforts to encourage vaccine exploration and looking for something like that. But in the meantime, you know, what can I tell you, right? He got the coronavirus in October. It was already too late, but he had spent April and March saying, yeah, wouldn't it be great if we were all in church for Easter and unmasked and packing the churches and what a great thing it would be. He was a maniac, not to mention all the crazy other stuff he said along the way. Inject yourself with bleach, stick a light bulb up your, you know, whatever, you know. Yeah, there's exaggerations of what he said and why he said it. But millions of people would be in much better shape and would have been in much better shape in the long run once we find out what the long-term effects of this thing really is. If only he had confronted this. And I mean, honestly, for the part of America that believes in signs from God, and that can be any number of different ways you can believe in signs from God, having the President of the United States, loudmouth, a-hole, jackass, refusing to take any advice from anybody, walking around saying we should be in the churches. Wouldn't that be great? Everybody pack the churches. This is over. Or there'll be 15 cases. Soon it'll be down to 0. Or you could inject bleach. I don't want to wear a mask. People say the masks don't work. And that he is struck dead by the virus in October of 2020. I can't think of anything that would have turned around the American response better than that. Here's your hero. I'm very strong. I have very good genes. I'm very tough, strong guy. The virus, I'm going to beat it. The masks don't work. Maybe you should stick a light bulb up places and other things and inject bleach. Drink your fish tank. If that guy had been struck dead, how would people who believe in signs from God have taken that? God just told you that this guy is so wrong and so dangerous that now, boom, he's killed. Now, are you going to put on a mask? Are you going to take this seriously? Your Superman was just slain by the virus. Struck dead, tough guy, great genes. And that would have been the best thing America had ever experienced in public health emergencies ever. And it was 100% what was called for at that juncture. But what can you do? Doctors can't just not, they can't do it. It's not up to them. The decision's been made. There's no other possible response but to try to treat the patient and save the patient's life. President, anybody, but certainly, yes, the president gets special treatment. He really does. But what a difference that would have made. Oh my God. This thing, we certainly wouldn't still be dealing with it now, I think, because we would have masked up like never before, like you've never seen, like you can't even believe, to put it in his terms. Those foolish, foolish doctors. And I mean, it's a trolley problem failure. You're not supposed to do this sort of thing, but if you could just see, and I mean, it was foreseeable. It was foreseeable. I was saying it at the time. Everybody was saying it at the time who'd had enough with Trump. Just let him go. Just let him go. And if he goes, millions will be saved. And now with all the research that's going on with long COVID and what they think is an increase in, Alzheimer's or Alzheimer's-like symptoms in the long term with people with long COVID, what are we going to do? When there's now 90 million people reportedly having been, who actually have reported their infections. Who knows how many people have actually been infected with the virus? But I assume that the long-term, long COVID worries probably only, maybe, I have no idea what the medicine says on this, only affect the people who, I guess, were at least impacted by the disease. I mean, there's mild symptoms and then there's no symptoms. And reportedly, there's millions of people who have probably had been infected by the virus, but who just didn't exhibit any symptoms whatsoever. So I either have totally avoided the virus or I'm one of those people who got it and just didn't know it because it literally didn't feel sick at all. But many other people have had it and do have mild symptoms. And I don't know what the difference is in long-term Alzheimer's-like effects. But the point is, whether you felt bad or not, but the point is there could be millions of people who have this debilitating illness in the future, many of whom would not have had the trolley simply run onto the other track and sacrificed the one for the good of the many. I mean, I do feel that way. I mean, well, I don't think I can make it any clearer. You probably heard it in my voice, but I'm not kidding. I do believe that's what should have happened. But I will say this. If I'm the doctors, I totally understand doing it exactly the way you do. How could you do it any other way? You wouldn't want a doctor that does it any other way. But it makes an interesting thought problem, certainly, for ethicists. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that a lot of people would be a lot better off had he been taken out by the virus. And by the way, speaking of long-term effects, it could be anything. It could just be age, just regular Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's-like symptoms that are turning Trump into an addled mess right now. I mean, he was always bound for that station anyway. Well, I don't know how much COVID, if anything, had any to do with it, but he did get it pretty seriously. All right, I should get off of this topic because basically it's just me sitting around wishing that he had died a long time ago, and, it's not really the way you want to spend your time at any time of year, much less now. Anyway, in detail, Haberman reports how Trump was fearful of dying and how his condition grew worse at the White House. Deputy Chief of Staff of Operations Tony Ornato, remember that guy? The Secret Service dude. Why they don't mention him as a Secret Service personality here. They just call him Deputy Chief of Staff of Operations. But that's the guy. Tony Ornato warned the president that if he fell into a more dire situation, procedures to ensure the continuity of government would have to be set in motion. Haberman writes, that's interesting. Not, you might die. Well, I don't know. That ordinarily would have scared him. But how about this? Power passes out of your hands and into, let's say, Mike Pence's hands at that point. Oh, we can't have that, right? Trump was appalled by the sight of protective face masks. And this is why we're all sick right now, as a matter of fact. Telling aides to remove them in his presence throughout 2020. Get that effing thing off. And they use the dashes here. That's true. But why they use them for the B word, I don't know. But okay. Sensibilities inside the newsroom. Get that effing thing off, he said during one meeting, according to Haberman's book. Trump repeatedly wanted credit for vaccines, but told aides he could not get the credit he deserved because of the, quote, radical right, referring to his own supporters. That's interesting that he came to blame. I mean, he's right in that he couldn't talk up the credit he deserved, if he deserved it at all, for the vaccines. And I don't even give him the credit for it. I think any president would have been, the proof that any president would have been able to do what he did is that he did it. He's the least capable person who's ever held the office. All he did was not get in his own way. That's all he had to do. Anyway, he repeatedly encouraged aides to avoid the topic of the coronavirus because he viewed it as a political loser for him. Don't talk about it on TV, he told Republican National Committee's chairwoman, Ronna Romney. According to the book, even as the virus dominated the news. Don't make such a big deal out of this, Trump said of the pandemic in one March 2020 conversation. March 2020. We're all hiding. Don't make a big deal out of this. Let's see, in a conversation with then Governor Andrew Cuomo, another great hero, you're going to make it a problem. You are. Oh, my God. The book shows frequent attempts from advisors to tell Trump to tone down his behavior, fearful that he was going to lose his re-election bid, which he did, because of his own personal conduct, which it was. He was repeatedly shown polling that his coronavirus news conferences were hurting him in an attempt to get him to take the virus and his response more seriously. Again, the doctors should have done the job. I know that's not what they're supposed to do, but it's whatever. Anyway, people are tired of the... Oh, this is William Barr speaking. People are tired of the effing drama. I don't remember what he sounds like. Attorney General William Barr told him in 2020. Barr was one of a number of aides who urged Trump to dial back his frequent attacks on others. The book also shows how Trump regularly pitted aides and even family members against one another in the White House because, conservative, loves his family, whatever. For example, Trump frequently told then White House Chief of Staff John Kelly that he wanted Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump to depart the White House, according to the book. How fun. Remember, though, the friends were privately appalled, and they are the moderating influences. In meetings with Kelly and White House counsel Don McGahn, Trump gave instructions to essentially fire the pair. Kelly and McGahn resisted, expressing their fear that he would not back them once his daughter and son-in-law pushed back. And that's probably right. They'll come in here and yell, and they'll say, I didn't want to do it. Kelly and McGahn, they're the ones that wanted it. I would never. He probably would. He would shift the blame to them. and they'd end up staying, and then they'd end up firing Kelly and McGahn, which happened, by the way. So, I don't think it was because they carried out his orders. They were clear. They clearly understood that this would be their doom, and they probably suspected, oh, well, now this means we're on our way out no matter what we do. But how interesting is that? Once again, I want to fire. You're fired. No. In real life, no. You guys do the firing. At one point, Trump was about to write on Twitter that his daughter and son-in-law were leaving the White House. Kelly stopped him, saying Trump had to talk to them directly before doing so. Trump agreed, then didn't actually do it, right? So never followed up with the conversation. Which, is it he's a coward and so changed his mind, or he's a forgetful idiot, or has Alzheimer's and can't remember from minute to minute that he didn't do it? I don't know. Any one of those options would explain it. Trump gave former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani control of his legal team because his other lawyers were not willing to go far enough to overturn the 2020 election. Haberman writes, "Okay, Rudy, you're in charge. Go wild. Do anything you want. I don't care," Trump said over the phone as he pushed him to help overturn the results. "My lawyers are terrible." He frequently berated White House counsel Patsy Baloney, according to the book, in the aftermath of the election. And meanwhile, he's out there defending him. Whatever. In the aftermath of the election, Haberman described the president who increasingly became enamored with conspiracy theories and staying in the White House, bringing in lawyers whom his core group of advisors saw as deluded, and with some of his longest advisors effectively trying to hide and run out the clock. It shows how he relishes his role as a political kingmaker in the GOP. You know the GOP. During one of our interviews with Trump, Haberman writes that Senator Lindsey Graham came in and praised his golf game. "The greatest comeback in American history," Graham declared. Trump looked at me. "You know why Lindsey kisses my ass?" he asked. "So I'll endorse his friends." Graham laughed uproariously. Har, har, har. More than many tomes about Trump, the book delves into his long history as a developer in New York, where Haberman talked with many of his former friends and executives about his tendency to speak in crass terms about, women, and to skirt financial laws, and how he created a mystique around him that endured to the presidency. Haberman traces Trump's political career back to the 80s, where she reports he frequently made comments that were homophobic, particularly toward gay men, and washed his hands immediately after meeting someone who had AIDS. So fun. She describes Trump's complicated relationship with his father and the way they avoided paying taxes over the years. She writes that Trump mused about wanting black judges for his cases because his late lawyer, Roy Cohn, said they could be manipulated. Even as a businessman, she said he was looking at politics, getting polling presentations on his image as early as 1987. Some of the book's episodes border on the bizarre. Oh, here comes some bizarre ones. Might as well discuss them as our exit here. Haberman describes Representative Debbie Dingell getting a phone call from an unknown member. When she answered, the man on the other end identified himself as a Washington Post reporter and said he knew her husband from his investigations in Congress. The name he gave was not one she recognized. The man asked Dingell if she was looking for an apology from Trump. "No," she replied, "merely that people could be civil to one another." As the man talked, Dingell couldn't shake the idea that his voice sounded like that of the 45th president. How could anybody be fooled by this guy? "Hello, Debbie Dingell. This is John Barron. I'm a reporter for the Political Times, and I was just wondering, do you want an apology from Trump?" Was that it? Okay, interesting. During preparations for the third debate, let's squeeze one more in here before our music begins. During preparations for the third debate in 2016, Hillary Clinton's team was disrupted by a warning from the husband of Senator Dianne Feinstein, who said he had been told that Russians might try to poison Clinton through a handshake with Trump to inflict a dramatic health episode during the debate. Haberman reports. I don't know who's the more bizarre in all of that, but I mean, the fact that you would have to even consider it, maybe they would. Would he deliver that? Would Trump do that? can't be sure. That's pretty crazy all by itself. Wow, that's a weird one. Never heard that one. She says Clinton did not take it seriously, and now White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain, who was helping with debate prep, questioned whether Trump could poison Clinton but not himself. Like, how would that work? Her communications director, Jennifer Palmieri, took the prospect seriously enough to check it out. The warning turned out to be mere speculation from a historian with no knowledge of Russian plans. That's a weird thing all by itself. Haberman, a longtime Trump chronicler, concludes that Trump often says what he needs to get through the day, and that many people read more deeply into his motivations than he even knows at the time. When asked if he's glad he ran for the presidency, Haberman suggests the answer reveals his motivations. The answer is, yeah, I think so, because here's the way I look at it. Oh, I guess this is actually him. I have so many rich friends, and nobody knows who they are. I guess that's supposed to mean, like, now you know who I am. I have rich friends, and they could all be well known if they ran for president, but I didn't, so I'm the best now. I don't know. In the book's final pages, Haberman reproduces several pages of Trump's answers to her questions for the book. He sent back pages in all capital letters, handwritten in marker, 2 weeks after the deadline had passed, of course. Haberman said, how long will it be after the deadline passes? I really need those things. Oh, very soon. 2 weeks. And you know what? Apparently he actually made good on the 2 weeks thing. Well, anyway, hilarity ensues if you read the conclusion.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yeah, you should see. I mean, most of his answers to some of the questions. This is a fantasy question. I know nothing about this one. Actually, there is some truth in that one. And fake news, good night, is apparently the way he responds in writing to her questions. Oh my gosh. Well, anyway, how about staying tuned for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next? You kind of have to.